least just 1 year apart from each other, Once Upon a Time in the West and The Wild Bunch came out when the Western genre was falling out of favor with audiences who could not relate to the cliched white hat, black hat, Old West story anymore. Due to the civil rights movement, student protests, and the war in Vietnam, an entire generation of people became disillusioned with their authority figures and started questioning the world around them. This cultural change was reflected in cinema when young people started to reject the John Wayne Western hero for an anti-hero that they believed reflected the real brutality of the American West. Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy were some of the few westerns that were profitable in America during the turbulent 1960s. Their box office success gave Leone international attention, but after The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it felt that he said everything he could about the genre. He desperately wanted to make his dream project, Once Upon a Time in America, as his next film, but couldn't get the financing. So out of desperation, he accepted a deal with Paramount Pictures to make one more western for the studio in the hopes of raising enough money to make his gangster epic. Having exhausted all of his ideas from his Man with No Name films, Leone was forced to come up with an original story that did not involve his famous anti-hero. He partnered up with future directors Bernardo Bertolucci and Dario Argento to write a story that paid tribute to the Western genre that he loved, but to also criticize the triumphalist ideology that was promoted in many classic Westerns. It was also during this time that Bertolucci helped persuade Leone into doing something that he'd never done before, and that was to tell a story with a strong female character. After Leone embraced this idea, Once Upon a Time in the West started to take the shape of a postmodern Western, a film that deliberately used all the famous Western archetypes and images in hopes of being, dare I say, meta. This artistic choice of being self-aware allowed Leone and his screenwriters to include political commentary that challenged the American belief of manifest destiny and robber baron capitalism. This was shown in the film in two ways. First was showing the construction of the railroad, representing Eastern industrialization that would destroy the Wild West culture of the cowboy and cattle rancher. Second was the casting of Henry Fonda as the villain Frank, who up until this film was famous for portraying all-American heroes like Abraham Lincoln and Tom Joad. But now he was cast as a villain who terrorized the West in his youth and then became an enforcer for a railroad tycoon. I feel that the casting of Fonda in this role was done to criticize the myth of the heroic cowboy that was shown in several Hollywood westerns. The documented violence that came with Western expansion and manifest destiny was never explored in Hollywood cinema. Leone tried to acknowledge this brutality at the end of the film, where a beautiful shot of Monument Valley is juxtaposed with the image of a young harmonica and his brother being held captive and tortured by Frank. Once Upon a Time in the West may have had a political subtext, but overall it had a romantic view of the Old West. You can't help but feel a sadness for the film's characters who know that their moment in history is coming to an end, where the wild frontier would become civilized by trains and telegraphs. Jill and Harmonica accept this fate, but the characters in another Western would try to fight it.
Now, I want you to apologize to this. Yes, sir, can I help you? If they move, kill them.
Released in 1969, The Wild Bunch explored many of the same themes as Once Upon a Time in the West, but it did not share the romantic point of view that Leone had. Sam Peckinpah wanted to show the death of the Wild West through the point of view of an outlaw gang that once survived by robbing banks and stagecoaches, but now has to face the fact that their way of life was coming to an end.
Maybe a payroll, maybe a bank.
Maybe that damn railroad.
That damn railroad you're talking about sure as hell ain't getting no easier.
And you boys ain't getting any younger either.
We gotta start thinking beyond our guns. Those days are closing fast.
The Wild Bunch gang is constantly on the run from the law and modern civilization, finding themselves in rural Mexico, the last frontier land that they can hide out in. What also makes the Wild Bunch different from Once Upon a Time in the West is its lack of classic character archetypes. There are no white hats or black hats. All of the characters are dirty. Even the band of bounty hunters hired to kill the bunch is led by Thornton, a man who used to work with Pike. Peckinpah was always criticized for the violent images that he showed in his films that many thought bordered on being exploitation. Violence might have become a crutch in some of Peckinpah's later films, but I think it was used perfectly in The Wild Bunch. Peckinpah wanted to show a level of violence that had never been seen in westerns before, which for the most part only showed shootouts that ended with one bullet to the bad guy's stomach. The West in Peckinpah's films was far from painless. It was a territory where you constantly struggled to stay alive, whether you were a settler, sheriff, or a criminal. The most famous observation about The Wild Bunch was that it was made as a commentary to the war in Vietnam. It's not hard to make this association when you see a small group of American gunfighters in a foreign territory killing several enemy soldiers, but in the end becoming outnumbered and outgunned. I feel the Vietnam comparison is too short-sighted, because if you look at Peckinpah's other films, particularly Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, he felt that the violent nature of the American West has never gone away and will never go away. Whether it be fights over land, water, drugs, or human trafficking, there will always be violence in the West. The reason why I wanted to investigate these two films is that they're both brave films made by brave filmmakers who wanted to experiment with an established genre and to make controversial statements inside that genre. Both films remind you that you can make commercial movies that can be entertaining and intelligent at the same time, something that's becoming harder to find in modern cinema. Thanks for watching.